Stop. Hey, security. Handle that.
Boosie has now been arrested for an aggravated assault after hitting a club security guard with a hookah, breaking the glass over the guy's head.
The feds don't forget, and Boosie Badazz just gave them exactly what they've been waiting for. Let's talk about what's really happening here, because the headlines are calling this a nightclub fight, a hookah incident, a money grab situation. That's the surface. That's what they want you to argue about. But underneath this Houston story is something that runs a lot deeper. And if you care about Boosie, if you've been rocking with him since Baton Rouge, you need to hear all of this right now.
And apparently this whole thing went down while he's on federal probation, federal supervision from that federal gun case he caught.
Because the walls are closing in, and too many people are treating this like a Friday night story instead of the legal time bomb that it actually is.
Boosie now faces aggravated assault charge after allegedly hitting a security guard in the head with a glass hookah.
Here is what happened. Boosie Badazz is in a Houston nightclub. Downtown, closing time. A woman in his party gets denied access to a restroom because the venue is shutting down. That's the spark. The woman reportedly puts her hands on the security guard. Now things escalate. The guard is on the ground picking up this woman's dropped belongings, her keys, her phone, and then he gets hit in the back of the head. Hard. The guard turns around and sees Boosie holding a broken glass hookah base.
He said that when he turned around, he observed blood running down his face and observed the defendant, Boosie, holding a broken glass hookah base in his hand.
The man gets transported to the hospital. 8 staples. 8 staples to close the wound on the back of his skull. That is not a minor altercation. That is a man whose night ended in a hospital room getting his head sewn back together. Boosie is now charged with felony aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The bond was set at $85,000. His lawyer worked out what they're calling a walk-through bond, meaning Boosie didn't sit in a cell, he appeared in Harris County Court and walked.
The bond conditions are to stay away from the place where this situation occurred, as well as to not have any contact with the complaining witness in the case. And we have a new court date of September 15th.
And then, almost immediately, Boosie jumped on Facebook Live and told his version. Said the whole thing was a money grab. Said nobody actually saw him do it. And that part, that last part especially, is going to matter more than Boosie might realize right now.
It's basically a money grab, man. The facts of the case have come out. I mean, we in court now. But this is a money grab, man.
Because here is where we have to slow down and talk about the bigger picture. Because this incident did not happen in a vacuum. This happened to a man who has been living under a legal microscope for years. This happened to a man whose name has been circling in federal conversations that go way beyond a hookah and a nightclub. And the way this case is constructed, the eyewitness gap, the physical evidence, the hospital documentation, the felony charge, this creates a specific kind of legal pressure that can be used in ways that extend far beyond what happened in that Houston club. Let's talk about who Boosie is in the system's eyes. Not who he is to us. Not the culture icon, not the Baton Rouge voice, not the artist who survived cancer, who survived prison, who survived beef that would have erased most people. We know who Boosie is. But in the system's file, Boosie is a documented felony history, a prior incarceration, a public figure who travels with an entourage, who moves through nightlife, who operates in spaces that law enforcement has been using as leverage points for years. That's the file. That's the lens. And every new incident doesn't get evaluated on its own. It gets stacked on top of everything that came before it. And what came before it? There is a California gun case sitting in the background of all of this. And the key word is sitting. Not resolved in the way people think. Not gone, not dead, sitting. That case never fully went away in the way that would actually give Boosie clean legal air to breathe. That case was a warning shot. And now this Houston incident, a felony aggravated assault with a deadly weapon charge, lands on top of it. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand how federal prosecutors think about patterns? Because they don't see separate incidents. They see a narrative. They see a through line. They see a man who keeps finding himself in violent, documented, criminal legal situations. And they build around that. every new charge is another brick in a wall that eventually becomes impossible to climb over. And right now, Boosie is handing them the bricks himself. Boosie said nobody actually saw him do it. And look, in a court of law, that matters enormously.
You're gonna assume Boosie did it. But the guy that got hit in the head didn't see Boosie do it. And the so-called witness also clarified he didn't see Boosie do it.
Eyewitness testimony is often the spine of a prosecution. If no one directly witnessed Boosie swinging that hookah base, that is a real gap in the case. His attorney clearly knows this, which is probably why the walkthrough bond got negotiated. There's a defense to be built here. We're not saying Boosie is definitely going down on this charge. What we are saying is that the charge exists now. The documentation exists now. The hospital record exists now. The 8 staples exist now. And none of that disappears because the eyewitness situation is complicated. Because here's what people don't understand about how federal interest works. Federal prosecutors are not waiting for a conviction. They are watching for a posture. They are watching for a pattern of behavior that they can present as part of a larger argument. And a felony assault charge, even one that gets reduced, even one that gets dismissed, even one that never makes it to a jury verdict, that charge becomes a data point. It becomes a filing. It becomes something that gets referenced in conversations you'll never hear about. That's how the game works. That's always been how the game works for black artists who come from where Boosie comes from. The charge doesn't have to stick to do damage. The charge just has to exist. Now let's talk about why the hookah incident itself is so uniquely dangerous from a legal strategy standpoint. The fact that the security guard was struck from behind while he was on the ground picking up someone's belongings, that detail matters. Because that is not a mutual combat situation. That is not 2 people squaring up. That is a man with his back turned, vulnerable, doing something completely non-threatening, and then getting hit hard enough to require 8 staples. Prosecutors love that detail. Defense attorneys fear that detail because it removes the self-defense argument. It removes the mutual escalation argument. It strips away the contextual fog that usually gives defense teams room to work. The way this incident is documented in those court records, it reads like a one-sided act of violence, and that framing is going to be very hard to shake. And Boosie's response, going to Facebook immediately, calling it a money grab, leaning into the nobody saw me defense publicly, that is a complicated move. On one level, you understand it. Boosie is from a world where you speak your truth directly to your people. That's authentic. That's who he is. But from a legal strategy standpoint, every word said publicly in an active felony case is a word that can be used, twisted, or contextualized against you. His attorneys cannot be happy that he went live. They cannot be comfortable with the public framing he's putting out, because now the prosecution has his words. Now the prosecution can argue consciousness of guilt, can argue a man who jumped on camera to shape a narrative before the investigation was even complete. That's not a theory. That is a documented prosecutorial tactic. And think about who is actually watching that Facebook Live. Think about the full audience. His fans are watching, yes, but investigators are watching too. Prosecutors' offices have people assigned specifically to monitor the social media of individuals with open cases. That is not paranoia, that is procedure. Every timestamp, every word choice, every moment where Boosie's effect on camera does or doesn't match what the defense is going to argue in court, all of it gets cataloged. And Harris County is not a small operation. Houston is the 4th largest city in America. The DA's office there has resources, and they have seen this exact scenario play out before. The defendant who goes public, who performs confidence, who dares the system to come at him. Sometimes that works. In this climate, with this prior history, it is a roll of the dice that the people closest to Boosie should not be comfortable watching him take. Here's what this audience needs to understand about the moment we're in right now. We are watching a man who has survived everything: prison, cancer, loss, industry betrayal, every kind of war, potentially walk into a situation that the system has been patient enough to wait for. And the system is patient. That's the thing people underestimate. The system doesn't have to move fast. It just has to keep the files open. It just has to keep adding pages. And Boosie keeps giving them pages to add. The California gun case added a page. This Houston hookah incident just added another page. And at some point, and nobody can tell you exactly when that point is, the file gets thick enough that someone makes a decision to act on it in a way that is permanent. The people around Boosie right now, his inner circle, his management, his attorneys, they need to be having a very specific conversation. Not about the bond, not about the money grab narrative, about what comes next if this case gets picked up or referenced in a broader federal context, about what the posture of his public presence looks like going forward, about whether Facebook Live is the right platform for his legal defense. Because right now, from the outside looking in, it looks like Boosie is doing what he's always done, facing it head on, speaking directly, trusting his instincts. And those instincts have kept him alive and free in situations that would have broken other people. But this particular legal climate, with this particular history behind him, requires a different kind of discipline. The instinct that kept him standing on the street is not the same instinct that keeps you free when the federal machinery has already identified you as a target. Those are two completely different survival skill sets, and that discipline has to extend to the people in his circle too, because one of the things that never gets talked about enough in these situations is how exposure travels. It is rarely just the artist who ends up in the crosshairs. When federal interest intensifies around a figure like Boosie, it radiates outward. People who were present that night in Houston, people who travel with him regularly, people who might have information, whether they realize it or not, that becomes valuable to a prosecution building a larger case. The people around him are not insulated just because their names aren't on the charge sheet right now. That can change. That changes all the time. And loyalty in those moments gets tested in ways that no amount of street credibility fully prepares you for. The history of this industry is littered with examples of inner circles that collapsed under that kind of pressure. Not because the people in them were weak, but because the legal machine is specifically engineered to create fractures. The fans want to rally. The culture wants to say this is a setup, this is a money grab, this is someone trying to take down Boosie because he's too powerful and too independent and too connected to the streets to be controlled. And maybe there are elements of that in the mix, because there always are when we're talking about black artists from Boosie's background operating in these spaces. But the legal record doesn't care about the narrative. The legal record just cares about what's documented. And what's documented right now is a felony charge, a hospital visit, 8 staples, and a broken hookah used as a weapon. This is not the end, but it could be the beginning of something that becomes irreversible if the right moves aren't made right now in the next weeks and months, away from cameras, away from Facebook Live, in rooms with the right lawyers having the right conversations. The feds don't announce themselves. They don't give you a countdown. They just build. And then one day, the door opens, and the time to prepare was always before that moment, never after. Boosie has beaten the system before. We know that. The culture knows that. But the system took notes every single time he beat it. And those notes are still in the file. And that file is still open. This is the most dangerous moment of Boosie Badazz's legal life. And the people around him need to treat it exactly like that. If you're tired of the watered down takes and want the real story behind what's happening in the culture, stick with BarzBuzz. We don't do PR. We don't do spin. Just the truth the industry doesn't want trending. Subscribe and make sure you're notified. The next one drops sooner than you think.